you ready to do another podcast for the first time in 3 years?
Yes,
We're going to make this
do
happen. All right, let's make it happen. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the What You Don't Hear podcast. This is a 15-minute Friday where myself and a returning guest, we sit down one more time, but this time we're talking about a specific topic or subject with the goal and the hope of maybe sending you into your weekend or your upcoming week with some positive, actionable, or just thought-provoking advice and opinion. Returning to the show for the first time in a while,
Yes.
Hanisha, welcome back.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to be back. I know, I can't believe it's been so long.
It has genuine. The fact that it has literally been 3 years is mind-blowing to me.
It's crazy.
And is very, very insane. Here's actually, before we get into the topic, here's something I want to learn right off the bat. What is the right way to say your last name?
Patel.
Okay, so I've been saying it right.
Yes.
All right, folks,
Yes.
good. We're good. Thank goodness.
We're good.
I haven't been mispronouncing it for the last 3 years.
You're good.
Beautiful. Okay. So we're going to do a lot shorter episode this time.
Yes.
Last time we did your full story episode, but this one we're going to dig into a specific topic. So what is the topic for this episode?
So we're going to be talking about the things that are missing in conventional postpartum care. Within the last 3 years, I have gotten pregnant and given birth.
Lots changed. Lots happened.
So I have a 15-month-old son now. And so I have personally gone through my own postpartum experience that I can talk about a little bit. But I think one of the biggest things that are missing in women's health is the postpartum care. Because right now, women get a lot of appointments during their pregnancy, and then right as soon as they give birth, they get 1 6-week appointment with their doctor where they do very basic labs, if they do labs. A lot of doctors unfortunately don't, which I think is crazy, and we'll talk about that as well. But they do very basic labs, if any, at 6 weeks, and then they never see their doctor again.
Interesting.
Never.
Okay.
But for the kids, for the child who was just born, you have an appointment at least once a month for the first few months, and then every 3 months, and then every 6 months, and it just continues like that. But the mother's totally forgotten at that point, and what I have also seen so many women experience is when they do talk to their doctors about a lot of their symptoms, for example, experiencing a lot of fatigue or low energy, experiencing some depression, anxiety, irritability, having pain even, like they're experiencing joint pain or chronic pain, they're having pain with sex, and a lot of doctors dismiss their symptoms. And this is the worst thing I ever hear is when their doctor says, it's just motherhood.
Okay.
And I want to remind people and let people know that motherhood is not a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
It is
okay.
not a diagnosis. We were not meant to suffer through motherhood. And I think there's this idea that motherhood is just, it's hard, and it is hard. But it doesn't mean we were meant to suffer through it. We weren't meant to deal with all of these things. We were meant to enjoy it, because especially right now, for me right now, my son's only 15 months old, this is the time that I really get to spend with him. And then everything's as he gets older, it's, he's going to go to school and all this stuff. And it's just he's going to be in sports or music or whatever he chooses, all his extracurriculars. And it's just, you don't get the same type of time that you do right now in the beginning years,
Yeah. So where does even that, is that idea of just it's just motherhood? Does that come from the classic, this is just how it's always been? We just sort of don't talk about what happens to the mom after. Why do you think that's been avoided, or why is that even still a thing? I know that's such a vague question, or just a general question.
And I feel like that's really hard to answer. I think in general, a lot of women's health gets a lot of women get gaslighted within medicine a lot of times. I saw this video where this woman was talking about how her husband went to the doctor and said he was feeling low energy, and this woman has had her youngest is 5 years old, and she went to her doctor saying the same thing, but way more. And her doctor said, "Oh, welcome to motherhood." And his doctor said, okay, let's do all these tests to see what's going on.
Interesting.
And really figure out why you're experiencing low energy.
Which is so wild because the guy didn't spend 9 months growing a human being.
Yes, and then didn't go through labor.
Right.
And have these like shift of hormones to the same degree. So men actually do, which is actually very fascinating. Men do experience some hormonal shifts themselves when their partner is giving birth, which is really cool.
Wow, yeah, okay.
And that's where we will see a little bit of lower testosterone levels in men after their partner has given birth. And that's because and then higher levels of oxytocin because they're so in love with their babies, which is the coolest thing. And so they're there's this shift there, which is awesome. But really, the person who's experiencing all these hormonal shifts is the woman, and it's neglected, unfortunately. And honestly, there's also just not a lot of research on how to support women during this time and all those things. Just because, again, I don't know why. I think it's just because it's been, kind of understood that women suffer. And I see so many women now who are constantly caffeinated and then drinking alcohol or wine, like the wine mom has become so popular, but it's like now you're coping with things that are actually making your symptoms worse.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. And I feel like all of that is a thing that, like, if it were ever to cross my mind, I'd be like, whoa, like, okay, a lot of those things probably exist. But hearing you explain them, I'm like, wow, wait, those things really exist? Like, I mean, I didn't know, nor would I have really thought about the idea that, like, just like you said, like, okay, in postpartum, like, the mom kind of stops being checked up on, and it's more about, like, okay, we're checking up on the baby, which obviously makes sense. But there's that strange disconnect of, okay, cool, you did the work. Now this other human's here. That's the focus now, which of course it is. But how can you, if you are not at your whatever your new best looks like, then you can't
take care of your baby as well.
Baby, right?
100%. And that is why I'm so passionate about this. And even before, like throughout pregnancy, everyone is so focused on like the baby's health. And for me, it's as simple as when mama is healthy, baby is healthy.
Right.
And that's postpartum, that's during pregnancy, that's just all the time. When the mother feels good, everyone usually feels good. Not just the baby, but the partner and everyone, right? And so, yeah, it's a really big missing piece that if we actually focused on the mother a little bit more, then we would actually have healthier babies in general, right? It'll come. But yes, like you said, it's definitely still important to check in on your baby, but also check in on the mother who went through this huge hormonal shift. And so with that, like I said, during that 6-week visit, so after 6 weeks postpartum, you might see a doctor and they might run some labs. They're very basic and don't really cover a lot, but for me, the way that I see it is, one, we need to be doing a little bit more extensive testing. So going deeper into your thyroid hormone, because that's one of the things that tends to shift often postpartum. And a lot of times when we see women experiencing postpartum depression, a lot of times if we find the root of the issue, it's their thyroid. Actually, most of the time it is. And so that is a big missing piece. So just check in on the thyroid. And it's not even just because conventionally they usually test for 1 marker, maybe 2. I test for 6 markers. That's because some of the other markers will go up way before So the marker that conventionally they usually test for is TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone, and that's the one that comes from your brain and signals to your thyroid to produce the thyroid hormone. Okay. And so when we check just that, it can be helpful for sure, but there are some things called antibodies, so there's thyroid antibodies, and this is what we see a lot postpartum because now you're having hormonal shifts and things that are going on in your body that your immune system might be reacting. And so thyroid antibodies are often created when your immune system is attacking itself. When that is elevated, that increases your risk of the TSH being elevated. So often conventionally what we see is that TSH, or the thyroid stimulating hormone, is normal, but the thyroid antibodies are elevated. And when, in terms of conventional medicine, they're looking at when to prescribe a medication. If that's the case, you don't need a medication. And a medication won't work. And so that is why they don't usually test for that. But there's so many things you could do naturally to support yourself in terms of supplementation, herbal medicine, things like that, even when you're nursing. And so that's another thing. So if you're breastfeeding, that's a whole nother just journey in itself, especially when you they just put a baby on you and you're like, I don't know how to do this, what's going on, and we don't have the support in general as a community. It used to be we used to be very tribal, and we were in villages, and so all the women were they told you about it, you saw women breastfeeding, it was normal, and now it's just not. And so we're all very individual, we're very separated, so many women have never seen a woman breastfeed before they have a child, which is crazy. So many women have never seen someone give birth until they have a child. And so that seems scary. But the more you actually watch healthy births, then the less scary it seems, right? And it's the same thing with breastfeeding, motherhood, all that. The more you are immersed in it, the easier it becomes.
Right.
And when it comes to the labs that are generally tested at 6 weeks, we should really be testing 6 weeks, and then things keep shifting. So again, at 4 months, or whenever you stop breastfeeding. So if a woman stops breastfeeding at 6 months, we definitely want to check it then, because there's another hormonal shift that's going on in your body. If she stops at 12 months, we want to check in then, because those hormone shifts are very drastic. And like I said, your thyroid, we can see a lot of imbalances there, but a lot of autoimmune conditions will come up postpartum as well, and it's something to look into. A lot of times these issues can be if you've already been dealing with maybe some things before you got pregnant. And so, for example, postpartum depression is actually more common in women who had elevated inflammatory estrogen levels prior to pregnancy. So what happens is, one of the symptoms some of the symptoms of inflammatory estrogens prior to pregnancy is whenever you're on your period, you're having a lot of menstrual cramps, you're having a lot of PMS symptoms, and that's, side note, PMS is not normal. It's premenstrual syndrome, and so it's a diagnosis. So it's not normal to experience that. But many women think it is, because again, we've normalized it. It's the same thing. We've normalized women's pain and suffering from before we even get pregnant and go through labor and go through postpartum experience, so that it's just continued. We're like, okay, we just suffer through life.
Right.
So many women just deal with pain every month.
Yeah.
Every month. And it's severe. And going through birth, it was definitely painful. But I remember talking to some women. I've talked to some women in the past and that I've worked with, and they've experienced that level of pain almost every month.
Wow. Okay.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
Okay. So I feel like we could make this like a 2-hour
100%.
Friday, right?
Yeah, there's so much to get into within 15 minutes.
we are already coming up on our 15 minutes. One of my big things that, if I'm listening to this and I am either I'm pregnant or I'm postpartum or whatever, are there big things that you would tell me, hey, try to pay attention to this? Or is it also hey, push for some checkups, go in and try to find those things? Or is it also what if somebody, and I know I'm asking you 100 questions, but what if somebody has tried to do a checkup and they just get told, you had a baby, it's normal? So if somebody's sitting there kind of dealing with all of these things or about to be, what are the big points that you would want to share with that person of what to look out for, what to look for right now, what to maybe plan ahead for, or whatever it may be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, those are all really great questions. And so the first one I'm going to answer is, if your doctor dismisses you like that, saying those symptoms are just normal, get a new doctor. Mm-hmm. It's it's not fun or easy, but you need a new doctor because that doctor is not supportive. And then, yes, you can also advocate for yourself. And this is what I'm so passionate about, advocating for yourself, so that your doctor will try to run some of these additional labs and things like that. But if they aren't willing to or aren't willing to work with you, get a new doctor. And that's what I'm going to say for that. When it comes to what else you can do, so like some of the things I already talked about, those symptoms, those are things to look out for in general. On top of that, there are a few things that I'm just going to recommend to just support yourself in general in terms of like your physical health. And that's going to start with one of the things, especially if you're nursing postpartum, and prepare for that. Prepare for postpartum. Actually, I'm going to say that first. Prepare for postpartum, because that is a very crazy time, and let go of some expectations of what you think postpartum is as well, and what you think things are supposed to be like. Let go of all of that, okay? Because you have no idea yet, and that's okay. But prepare in terms of like, okay, making sure that you have support, you're getting food, because it's so hard. You're not gonna wanna cook during those first few weeks for sure, if not a little bit longer. So making sure you have that support, but then also making sure you're getting enough food, especially if you're nursing, because a lot of women are just not eating enough. And then the baby takes all of your nutrients while you're pregnant and while you're nursing. They take everything. And so you're left depleted. And so we want to make sure that you're getting enough food. Usually women who are nursing are constantly hungry anyway, and there's a reason for that, because we are providing so much energy to another being. But the other things you could do is in terms of supplementation. So I definitely think that continuing your prenatal after pregnancy during postpartum period is essential. You need to continue it because, again, they're taking so many of your nutrients. Even if you're not breastfeeding, it's probably still going to be supportive, along with vitamin D and fish oil. And then choline is the other big one that I normally recommend, which helps support not only the baby's neurodevelopment while you're pregnant and postpartum, but also helps prevent complications during pregnancy, and then also helps prevent complications postpartum. So those are just like, in general, things that I would be like, all right, make sure you're doing these things.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I feel like it would make a lot of sense if we end up doing a part 2. Like if we do,
Yeah.
I feel like we should just do a 50-minute Friday on like part 2 of postpartum and
For
stuff. 'Cause
sure.
I
Yeah.
feel like we didn't even get through like half of the notes that you had that you wanted to talk about this. This 15 minutes flies
It does.
by. So before we wrap this episode up, is there one major point that you would really want to leave someone with? Even if it's like encompassing things we've already talked about, or one thing that's like, hey, we didn't dive into this, but if there's one thing I want you to know before you shut this episode off about postpartum, it's this thing. Is there anything like that you're like, if I could say one thing, it's going to be this?
Yes. I think it would be what I kind of just said about letting go of what you think it's supposed to be and what you think you're supposed to do. This like, don't should on yourself. We shouldn't be doing anything, right? So I think it would be letting go, let go of expectations during that period, and make sure you have the proper support. And that's from your partner, your doctor, and community. And so those are I would say the two big things.
I love it. And this flew by. Yes. Like I literally feel like we just talked for like 3 minutes, but that's a 15-minute Friday. If people want to come find you around the internet, if they want to ask you more questions about this, see what you're up to, or learn about all of the stuff that you share about any of this sort of stuff, where can they find you?
Instagram is usually the place I am more frequently, but I am on all the other platforms as well. But Instagram is really where you'll find a lot of my content. And my Instagram handle is holistichanisha. I'm sure you'll tag it or whatever.
Yep, it'll be there in the show notes.
Yeah, so that is my handle. And so I usually do try to post, I post a lot of like fertility, pregnancy, postpartum content. And so you can find me there. You can also shoot me an email or go to my website. My practice is called Mahan Health, and you can go there, and if you'd like to schedule a consultation, I'd love to work with you.
Beautiful. Hanisha, we did it. That's 50-Minute Friday.
Great.
Thank you so much.